Hello there, and welcome to the Cosmic Sleep Science. Tonight we'll wander into a hidden kingdom that lives all around us, and yet is so often overlooked: the world of mushrooms. Mushrooms are not quite plant, not quite animal, but something in between, a realm of their own. They breathe like we do. They grow in silence. And they've been shaping the life of this planet for longer than forests have existed. Some glow in the dark like lanterns scattered across the night. Some stretch vast and unseen beneath our feet, weaving together the roots of trees in a secret language. Others dazzle with colors so bright they look painted by hand, while a few hold poisons so deadly that a single taste could end a life. And yet mushrooms are also healers, builders, recyclers, and dreamers. They make bread rise. They turn grapes into wine. They can clean the world of oil and plastic. And they may even help us imagine how life could survive on other planets. If you enjoy these science explorations, feel free to like and subscribe or share a thought in the comments below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, let's begin. Mushrooms are more closely related to animals than plants. It surprises most people to learn that mushrooms, despite living quietly in forests and sprouting from soil like flowers, are actually closer relatives to us than they are to trees. At the genetic level, fungi share a common ancestor with animals, not plants. They breathe in oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide, just as we do. Their cell walls are not made of cellulose like plants, but of chitin, the same tough material that makes up the shells of insects and crustaceans. This strange kinship places fungi in a hidden family branch we rarely think about. When you walk through a forest, it may look as though mushrooms belong alongside the leaves and flowers. But in truth, their closest companions are creatures that walk, swim, and fly. To know that a mushroom is, in a way, more like us than like a blade of grass can change how you see the forest floor forever. Some mushrooms glow with their own natural light. Imagine walking at night through a forest where tiny lanterns are scattered in the moss. Mushrooms glowing softly, green or blue like fairy lights woven into the ground. This glow is called bioluminescence, the same kind of light that fireflies and some deep-sea creatures produce. More than 70 known mushroom species can shine this way, including the aptly named foxfire fungi. Scientists believe the glow might attract insects at night, helping the mushrooms spread their spores farther. Or perhaps it simply protects them from being eaten. The glow comes from a chemical reaction involving an enzyme called luciferase, the same family of reactions that give fireflies their spark. To see one of these mushrooms in the wild is to witness an ancient magic. Living light born from decay. Proof that even as wood rots and breaks down, beauty can still shine through the darkness. The underground world of mushrooms is far stranger than we imagine. What you see pushing through the soil, that familiar cap and stem, represents only a tiny fraction of the organism. The real body of a mushroom exists below ground, spreading through earth and leaf litter in an intricate web called mycelium. These thread-like structures, each strand thinner than a human hair, branch and reconnect endlessly, creating highways of life that can extend across acres of land. In the quiet darkness beneath your feet, this network never stops working, absorbing nutrients from decaying matter, communicating through chemical signals, building connections that scientists are only beginning to understand. The mushroom you pick is merely the fruit. The tree exists below, hidden, patient, and far more vast than anything visible above. When researchers in Oregon's Blue Mountains began mapping fungal networks in the late 1990s, they discovered something that challenged everything we thought we knew about the scale of individual organisms. A single specimen of honey fungus, spreading its mycelial threads through the forest soil, covered an area of nearly 2,400 acres. That is roughly 1,665 football fields. And based on its growth rate, scientists estimated this individual organism to be thousands of years old, perhaps as ancient as 8,000 years, making it not only the largest living thing on Earth, but also one of the oldest. This silent giant has been growing beneath the forest, unseen by human eyes, since before the pyramids were built. before written language existed. It has witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, felt the footsteps of countless animals, and absorbed the nutrients of millions of fallen trees, all while remaining completely invisible to the world above. The way mushrooms communicate might seem like science fiction, but it is very real science. Without brains, without neurons, without anything resembling a nervous system, fungi nevertheless send signals through their networks. Researchers measuring electrical activity in mycelium have detected pulses, rhythmic spikes that travel along the fungal threads. These electrical impulses change in frequency and pattern, possibly carrying information about food sources, threats, or environmental changes. Some scientists have even compared these patterns to rudimentary language, with different pulse sequences potentially encoding different meanings. It is as though the forest floor hums with conversations we're only now learning to detect. Trees connected by these fungal networks can share more than just nutrients. Warning signals about insect attacks can ripple through the web, allowing trees that haven't yet been attacked to begin producing defensive chemicals. Mother trees, the oldest and largest in a forest, can recognize their own offspring through these connections and preferentially send them extra resources. The forest, seen through this lens, is not a collection of individuals competing for survival, but a community interconnected and cooperative, with fungi serving as the invisible infrastructure that makes it all possible. Mushrooms have developed some of the most extreme survival strategies in nature. Take the tardigrade, like resilience of certain fungal spores. These microscopic packages of genetic information can endure conditions that would annihilate most life forms. Extreme heat that would boil water, freezing cold that turns tissues to ice, radiation doses that would be lethal to humans many times over, the vacuum of space with its absence of air and water. And they can do this not for hours or days, but for years, even decades. In experiments, spores that had been dormant for over a century were successfully revived, sprouting into new mycelium as though no time had passed. This extraordinary durability comes from their structure. Multiple protective layers, compounds that stabilize proteins and DNA, the ability to completely shut down metabolism until conditions improve. They are time capsules of life, waiting with infinite patience for their moment to awaken. The relationship between mushrooms and the trees they connect with goes far deeper than simple nutrient exchange. Scientists call these partnerships mycorrhizal associations, and they represent one of the most successful collaborations in the history of life on Earth. The fungus wraps around, or even penetrates the tiny root hairs of plants, vastly expanding the surface area available for absorbing water and minerals. In exchange, the plant provides sugars created through photosynthesis, feeding the fungus which cannot make its own food. But this trade is sophisticated. The fungus doesn't just collect any nutrients. It actively hunts for specific minerals the plant needs, dissolving rock with acids, breaking down complex organic molecules, even capturing and digesting tiny soil organisms to extract nitrogen. In return, the plant doesn't simply dump sugar into the soil. It carefully regulates the flow, providing more when the fungus delivers valuable nutrients, less when it doesn't. It is a relationship with contracts, negotiations, and even a form of currency. Some scientists now believe that up to 90% of land plants depend on these fungal partners to survive. Without mycorrhizal fungi, most forests would wither and die. There are mushrooms that have learned to hunt, and their methods would fit perfectly in a horror film. Oyster mushrooms, those delicate fan-shaped fungi you might find in grocery stores, are actually predators. When nutrients are scarce, they release chemicals that paralyze tiny nematode worms in the soil. Once immobilized, the fungal threads penetrate the worm's body, releasing enzymes that liquefy its tissues from the inside. The mushroom then absorbs the nutrients, using the worm's own body as fertilizer. Other predatory fungi have evolved even more elaborate traps. Some create tiny loops that snap shut when a nematode swims through, tightening like a noose in a fraction of a second. Others form sticky knobs that glue worms in place, or branching networks that work like spiderwebs. These hunting strategies evolved because nitrogen, essential for growth, is often locked up in living organisms rather than free in the soil. By becoming predators, these fungi gained access to a protein-rich food source their competitors couldn't reach. The quiet forest floor hides countless tiny dramas, microscopic hunts happening in complete silence, where mushrooms are not the hunted, but the hunters. Mushrooms have shaped human civilization in ways we rarely acknowledge. Consider bread, one of humanity's oldest and most fundamental foods. Every loaf exists because of fungi. Yeast, those single-celled cousins of mushrooms, consume sugars in flour and release carbon dioxide gas. The gas gets trapped in the elastic gluten network, causing dough to rise and creating the light, airy texture we associate with good bread. Without yeast, bread would be dense, flat, unleavened. The same process gives us beer, wine, sake, and countless other fermented foods. Ancient peoples didn't understand the biology, but they learned to work with these invisible partners. They saved portions of successful dough as starters, unknowingly cultivating specific strains of yeast. They discovered that different conditions, different temperatures, different vessels produce different flavors. Every sourdough starter is a unique ecosystem, a living community of yeasts and bacteria that can be passed down through generations. Some bakeries have starters over 100 years old, living cultures that have been fed and maintained continuously, evolving slowly, developing flavors unique to their lineage. When you eat bread, you are tasting the work of fungi, but also participating in a tradition that stretches back to the very beginning of agriculture. The colors of mushrooms span nearly the entire visible spectrum, and each hue tells a story of chemistry and evolution. The brilliant red of the fly agaric, that iconic fairy tale mushroom with white spots, comes from muscarine and other alkaloids, pigments that warn animals of toxicity. The deep purple of amethyst deceivers contains pigments similar to those in berries and flowers, though produced through entirely different biochemical pathways. Bright orange chanterelles get their color from carotenoids, the same compounds that make carrots orange and that our bodies convert to vitamin A. Some mushrooms change color when touched or cut, their tissues reacting with oxygen to produce vivid blues, greens, or blacks. These color changes can happen in seconds, a visible sign of rapid chemical transformations. For mushroom hunters, color is both guide and warning. It helps identify edible species but also alerts to dangerous ones. For the mushrooms themselves, color serves many purposes, attracting animals to spread spores, warning predators to stay away, providing camouflage against the forest floor, or serving no purpose at all, simply a side effect of other useful chemistry. The forest's palette, painted in fungal pigments, is a gallery of evolutionary experiments. Some mushrooms have developed relationships with insects that border on domestication. Leafcutter ants in Central and South America don't eat the leaves they harvest. Instead, they chew them into a pulp and use it to fertilize underground fungus gardens. The ants tend these gardens with extraordinary care, weeding out competing fungi, removing sick patches, and even applying antimicrobial secretions to prevent disease. The fungus they cultivate exists nowhere else in nature. It has been domesticated by ants for millions of years, evolving to produce specialized structures that the ants harvest and eat. When a young queen leaves to start a new colony, she carries a small piece of fungus in a special pouch in her mouth. Her entire colony's survival depends on successfully establishing this fungal garden in her new home. The relationship is so deep that neither ant nor fungus can survive without the other. Scientists studying these gardens have found that the fungi the ants cultivate are actually clones, genetically identical across vast distances, propagated vegetatively for millennia. The ants have become farmers, and their crop is a mushroom that has forgotten how to live wild. The speed at which mushrooms can appear seems to defy logic. After a heavy rain, you might walk through a forest and find it empty of mushrooms. Return the next morning, and hundreds of caps have emerged overnight, some already fully formed and releasing spores. This isn't magic, but extraordinary biology. The mycelium has been there all along, spreading through the soil, storing energy and nutrients. When conditions become right, moisture and temperature aligning perfectly, the fungus constructs fruiting bodies with astonishing speed. Cells divide and expand at rates that would be impossible for most organisms, powered by reserves built up over weeks or months. Some mushrooms can grow several inches in a single night. The shaggy mane, also called lawyer's wig, can go from tiny button to full-size mushroom to liquefied black goo in less than 24 hours. This rapid growth and decay is part of their strategy. By fruiting quickly, they minimize exposure to predators and environmental damage. By decaying quickly, they ensure spores are released before the structure is eaten or dried out. The mushroom's visible life is brief, but intense, a sudden eruption of form and purpose before dissolving back into the earth. Mushrooms have been used as medicine for thousands of years, and modern science is discovering why traditional healers trusted them. The reishi mushroom, called lingji in Chinese, has been used for over 2,000 years to promote longevity and vitality. Research now shows it contains polysaccharides and triterpenes that modulate immune function, potentially explaining its traditional use for various ailments. Turkey tail mushroom, with its colorful, layered appearance, contains compounds that are being studied as cancer treatments, with some showing promise in clinical trials. Lion's mane mushroom, named for its cascading icicle-like appearance, contains compounds that stimulate nerve growth factor, potentially helping repair and maintain brain cells. In animal studies, it has shown ability to improve memory and cognitive function, even regenerating damaged nerves. Chaga, a fungus that grows on birch trees and looks more like burnt wood than a mushroom, is packed with antioxidants and has been used in Russian and Siberian traditional medicine for centuries. While not all traditional claims have been validated, many are being confirmed by research. These mushrooms are chemical factories, producing compounds that help them compete and survive in their environments. Compounds that sometimes, by chance or convergence, also affect human biology in beneficial ways. The networks mushrooms create can span not just acres, but entire ecosystems. In a single handful of healthy forest soil, there can be miles of mycelial threads, interweaving with roots, connecting dozens of plants, creating a living fabric of exchange and communication. These networks are not random. Studies have shown they have structure, with some nodes more highly connected than others, resembling the architecture of neural networks or the internet. Information flows through these systems. When one part of a forest experiences drought, connected trees can share water. When pests attack, warning signals propagate through the network. Older trees with more extensive fungal connections can support younger ones, sharing carbon to help them establish. But the network isn't purely altruistic. The fungi take their share, sometimes consuming up to 30% of the carbon a tree produces. And they connect competitors as well as allies, potentially allowing stronger trees to inhibit weaker ones by monopolizing fungal services. The forest floor hides an economy of staggering complexity, where resources flow according to rules we're only beginning to decode. Every plant negotiates with its fungal partners. Every fungus balances numerous plant relationships. The network pulses with traffic, resources moving, signals passing, a vast distributed intelligence emerging from countless simple interactions. Mushrooms can tell time in their own way. Many species fruit seasonally, appearing reliably in spring, summer, or fall. But they're not responding to the calendar. They're sensing environmental cues, tracking temperature, moisture, and day length with precision. Some mushrooms require a specific sequence of conditions, a period of cold followed by warming and rain. Others wait for the first frost or for soil temperature to drop below a certain threshold. This timing ensures spores are released when conditions favor their survival and dispersal. Fall mushrooms often fruit when insects are still active, but plant growth has slowed, reducing competition for animals' attention. Spring mushrooms emerge when the ground thaws and moisture is abundant, perfect for establishing new mycelium. The mushroom's internal biology tracks these external rhythms, accumulating signals until a threshold is reached, then triggering the rapid growth of fruiting bodies. In this way, fungi participate in the seasonal rhythms of the forest, their fruiting part of the ecosystem's temporal pattern, appearing and disappearing in predictable cycles, year after year, decade after decade. Some mushrooms produce scents that seem designed to manipulate human emotions. The candy cap mushroom smells intensely of maple syrup or burnt sugar, so strongly that even dried specimens can perfume an entire room. This scent comes from a compound called quabalactone, which also occurs in fenugreek and lovage. Chefs use candy caps to flavor desserts, ice cream, cookies, creating sweet dishes from a wild mushroom. Other mushrooms smell of coconut, almond, anise, or fresh bread. These scents evolved to attract insects or other animals, but they happen to overlap with human preferences, aromas we associate with comfort, food, and safety. Then there are the scents designed to repel. Stinkhorns emit the reek of rotting flesh, so powerful it can cause nausea. The smell attracts carrion flies, which spread the mushroom spores while investigating the false corpse. To the flies, it is irresistible. To humans, it is revolting, and yet both are elaborate chemical communications, molecular messages broadcast into the air, hoping to reach the right receiver. The mushroom speaks in scent, and whether we find it beautiful or disgusting depends entirely on whether we're the intended audience. The relationship between mushrooms and trees is so ancient that it may have made life on land possible. When plants first emerged from aquatic environments onto bare rock, they faced enormous challenges. No soil to anchor in, few nutrients available, desiccating air. Fossil evidence suggests that early land plants formed partnerships with fungi almost immediately, perhaps even before they developed true roots. These proto-mycorrhizal associations allowed the plants to access water and minerals from rock, while the fungi received sugars the plants produced. Together, they began the slow process of breaking stone into soil, creating the foundation for future forests. Over millions of years, this partnership drove one of the most dramatic transformations in Earth's history. Barren continents turned green. Atmospheric carbon dioxide levels dropped as plants spread, cooling the planet and making it more hospitable to animal life. And fungi were there for every step, invisible partners in the greening of the world. When you see a forest today, you are looking at the product of this ancient alliance, a collaboration so successful it literally changed the face of the planet. Without fungi, land plants might never have succeeded. Earth might have remained a world of barren stone and shallow seas, never developing the rich terrestrial ecosystems we depend on. Mushrooms have influenced human culture and mythology in countless ways. The fly agaric mushroom, with its bright red cap and white spots, appears in folklore around the world. In Siberia, it was associated with shamanic practices and spiritual journeys. In Europe, it became linked with fairy tales and magic. Some scholars suggest it influenced depictions of Santa Claus with the red and white colors, the association with reindeer, which eat these mushrooms, and the magical, transformative qualities. Fairy rings, those circular patterns of mushrooms in grass, were explained by countless legends, places where fairies danced, portals to other worlds, sites of magic that should not be disturbed. In Japan, mushrooms appear in art and literature as symbols of autumn, ephemerality, and hidden things. In Mesoamerica, sacred mushrooms were vehicles for communicating with gods. The mushroom's sudden appearance, strange forms, powerful effects, both nourishing and poisonous, made it a natural symbol for transformation, mystery, and the boundary between worlds. These cultural associations persist. Even today, mushrooms in art and design carry connotations of whimsy, magic, and the slightly uncanny. The physics of how mushrooms release spores is an engineering marvel. Many mushrooms hold their spores on the surface of gills or pores underneath the cap. To fall free, spores must overcome their tendency to stick to surfaces through electrostatic forces and moisture. Mushrooms solve this with extraordinary precision. They create a layer of water on the spore surface through condensation, then suddenly release it, catapulting the spore away from the gill surface into the airspace below the cap. This happens to millions of spores simultaneously, creating a cloud of microscopic projectiles falling in the protected space beneath the cap. Air currents, even the gentle drafts created by the mushroom's own cooling or the movement of animals, then carry these spores away. Some mushrooms actively create their own airflow. As moisture evaporates from the cap, it cools the surrounding air, which sinks and draws in warmer air from the sides, creating a gentle upward draft through the cap that helps lift spores into the breeze. Others orient their caps or grow taller stems to position spores in optimal airflow. The result is dispersal over astonishing distances. Spores can travel miles on the wind, crossing mountains, oceans, entire continents, each one a potential new colony, carrying the genetic legacy of its parent into unknown territory. Mushrooms can be older than they appear. The visible mushroom might last only days, but the mycelium that produced it could be decades or centuries old. That giant honey fungus in Oregon, thousands of years old, fruits new mushrooms every year. Each mushroom is just a temporary structure built and discarded, while the real organism persists underground. This challenges our usual understanding of individuality and lifespan. Is the mushroom the individual, or is it the mycelium? When does a fungus begin, and when does it end? If mycelium from a single spore spreads across acres and lives for millennia, periodically producing mushrooms that last a week, what is the organism's true form? Mycologists grapple with these questions. In practical terms, the mycelium is the organism, and mushrooms are its reproductive structures, like flowers on a plant. But unlike flowers, mushrooms can be genetically identical to each other and to the mycelium that produced them, all technically the same individual. So when you see a mushroom, you might be looking at an organism that is simultaneously a few days old and a few thousand years old, a temporary expression of an ancient, hidden life. Some mushrooms have defense mechanisms that go beyond poison. The bird's nest fungus, tiny cup-shaped structures that hold spore packets resembling eggs, uses raindrop physics as a weapon. When a raindrop hits the cup at the right angle, it splashes the eggs outward with tremendous force, sending them flying several meters. Each egg is attached to a sticky thread that wraps around grass stems or twigs, holding the spores in place until they can be eaten by grazing animals and dispersed in dung. The precision of this mechanism is remarkable. The cup's shape, the angle of its opening, the size and placement of the eggs, all optimized through evolution to maximize splash effectiveness. It is ballistics at microscopic scale, using water droplets as artillery shells. Other mushrooms coat themselves in slime that inhibits insect larvae or grow so quickly that they emerge and sporulate before predators can respond, or produce compounds that taste terrible without being toxic, educating animals to avoid them. The variety of defensive strategies mirrors the variety of forms. Each mushroom has evolved its own solution to the problem of surviving long enough to reproduce. And those solutions range from the chemical to the mechanical, from passive to active, from simple to astonishingly complex. The fossil record of mushrooms is frustratingly sparse, but what we have is tantalizing. Mushrooms decay quickly, rarely fossilizing, so most of what we know about ancient fungi comes from lucky accidents. Amber occasionally traps mushrooms, preserving them in exquisite detail. Spores, more durable than fruiting bodies, appear in ancient rock layers, giving us a timeline of fungal evolution. Chemical signatures, specific compounds that only fungi produce, show up in rocks dating back hundreds of millions of years. And occasionally, conditions are just right for a mushroom to be preserved. The oldest confirmed mushroom fossil is about 115 million years old, from the Cretaceous period, when dinosaurs dominated the Earth. But chemical and genetic evidence suggests fungi are far older, possibly over 1 billion years old, making them one of the earliest complex life forms. The scarcity of fossils means huge gaps in our knowledge. We know fungi were present and important, but we don't know what most ancient species looked like, how they lived, what they ate. It is like trying to understand human history, with only a handful of snapshots spanning millennia. Each new fossil discovery is precious, a glimpse into a lost world where fungi filled roles we can only guess at. Mushrooms can grow in patterns that look almost intelligent. Fairy rings expand outward at steady rates, sometimes a few inches per year, creating circles that can be centuries old and many meters across. The symmetry is striking, as though drawn with a compass, but it is simply the mycelium growing evenly in all directions, exhausting nutrients at the center and advancing at the periphery. On rotting logs, mushrooms often appear in neat rows, following the grain of the wood, their placement dictated by the architecture of the wood fibers they're decomposing. In some species, mushrooms cluster together, their caps touching, forming rosettes or bouquets. This happens when multiple fruiting bodies emerge from a dense knot of mycelium, each seeking to maximize spore dispersal while minimizing interference with neighbors. The patterns are emergent, arising from simple rules followed by the growing fungus. Grow toward nutrients, avoid crowding, maximize surface area. Follow these rules and patterns appear, geometry born from biology. To see these patterns is to glimpse the hidden order in nature. The way complexity emerges from simplicity, how the mindless process of growth can produce forms that seem purposeful, designed, almost artistic. Some mushrooms are so rare they've been seen only a handful of times. The devil's cigar, officially Corioactis gister, is known from only 2 locations on Earth, Central Texas and Japan. No one knows how a fungus came to exist in these 2 places, and nowhere else, separated by an ocean and thousands of miles. It is shaped like a dark brown cigar, but when it opens, it forms a star shape and releases spores. Fewer than 100 sightings have ever been recorded. Other mushrooms fruit so infrequently, or in such remote locations, that they remain barely known. Some were described from a single specimen collected a century ago and never seen again. They might be extinct or simply waiting, their mycelium dormant in some forgotten patch of forest, waiting for the right conditions to fruit. This rarity reminds us how much we still don't know about fungi. Even in well-studied regions, new species are discovered regularly. In remote rainforests, deep caves, or extreme environments, countless fungi remain completely unknown to science. The kingdom of mushrooms is vast, and we've explored only its edges. Mushrooms play crucial roles in death and renewal. When an animal dies in the forest, bacteria begin the decomposition process, but fungi finish it. They break down the complex molecules that bacteria can't touch, the tough proteins, the structural compounds, the stubborn polymers. They reduce a corpse to nutrients that plants can use, completing the cycle of life and death. Without fungi, dead material would accumulate far faster than it could break down. Forests would be buried in fallen trees. Grasslands would choke on dead grass. Nutrients would be locked away in corpses and debris, unavailable to the living. But fungi prevent this. They are nature's recyclers, working tirelessly, invisibly, to tear down what has died and return it to the soil. In doing this work, they're not being altruistic. They're feeding themselves, extracting energy from decay. But the side effect of their feeding is renewal. The forest breathes because of fungi. Carbon cycles because of fungi. Life continues because death is processed, transformed, recycled. The mushroom you see growing from a fallen log is a symbol of this cycle. Death feeding life, endings becoming beginnings. Some mushrooms can recognize kin and will refuse to mate with close relatives. When 2 compatible mycelia meet, they can fuse and exchange genetic material, creating a new organism with combined genetics. But fungi have mechanisms to avoid inbreeding. Through chemical signals and genetic markers, they can identify how closely related another mycelium is and reject fusion if it is too similar. This maintains genetic diversity, preventing the accumulation of harmful mutations that inbreeding causes. It is a form of recognition, a biological decision made without a brain or nervous system, yet effective nonetheless. The mechanisms are still being studied, but they involve complex molecular interactions at the point of contact between mycelia. Compatible but unrelated mycelia will fuse readily. Closely related ones will not, even if they're genetically compatible in other ways. This selectivity helps explain the enormous genetic diversity of fungi. By preferentially mating with distant relatives, they shuffle genes more effectively, creating new combinations, enhancing adaptability. It is evolution's way of encouraging diversity. Written into the basic biology of how fungi reproduce, mushrooms have been to space more often than you might think. Beyond spores tested for survival, actual growing fungi have been cultivated on space stations. Scientists want to understand how microgravity affects fungal growth, both to prevent contamination in spacecraft and to explore using fungi as food or material sources for long-duration missions. The results have been surprising. Some fungi grow differently in space, forming unusual structures or producing different compounds. Others seem largely unaffected. The mycelium sometimes grows in 3 dimensions more freely without gravity to pull it down, creating puffy, cloud-like masses instead of flat mats. These experiments hint at possibilities. Fungi that could recycle waste into food on Mars missions. Mycelium-based materials grown in space habitats. Even using fungi to extract minerals from asteroid material. The same adaptability that makes fungi successful on Earth. Their ability to break down almost anything, survive extreme conditions, grow rapidly with minimal resources, could make them invaluable partners as humanity ventures beyond our planet. The language of mushroom identification is rich and specific. Mycologists speak of caps that are convex, umbonate, infundibuliform, gills that are adnate, decurrent, free, stems that are fibrous, fistulous, bulbous, spore prints that are white, pink, brown, smells of anise, bleach, cucumbers, garlic, textures that are viscid, pruinose, glabrous. This specialized vocabulary captures the subtle variations that distinguish one species from another. A slight difference in gill attachment, a particular chemical smell, the color of bruised flesh. These can be the difference between edible and deadly. Experienced foragers learn to read mushrooms like texts, noting every detail, cross-referencing multiple characteristics before making an identification. It is a language that takes years to become fluent in, because mushrooms are masterful mimics. The edible meadow mushroom can look very similar to the deadly destroying angel. The delicious chanterelle can be confused with the toxic false chanterelle. There are no simple rules, no single feature that guarantees safety. Only careful observation, conservative caution, and deep knowledge can navigate the risks. For those who invest the time, though, the rewards are substantial. Not just edible mushrooms, but a deeper literacy in the language of the forest. The ability to read the subtle grammar of fungal forms. Mushrooms have economic importance far beyond food. The global market for medicinal mushrooms is worth billions. Reishi, turkey tail, cordyceps, and others are cultivated, processed, and sold as supplements worldwide. The enzyme industry depends on fungi. Many of the industrial enzymes used in manufacturing, from laundry detergent to paper production, are derived from fungi. Citric acid, a common food additive and cleaning agent, is produced industrially by fermenting sugars with Aspergillus niger, a fungus. Fungi are used in bioremediation, cleaning up contaminated sites. In creating sustainable materials, from packaging to construction. In producing biofuels, pharmaceuticals, and specialty chemicals. The versatility of fungal metabolism means they can be engineered or selected to produce almost any organic compound we need. Companies are exploring fungal leather alternatives, mycelium-based meat substitutes, biodegradable plastics grown from fungi. This economic potential is driving research and investment, turning obscure academic knowledge into commercial applications. The mushrooms you ignore on a walk might belong to a species whose relatives are revolutionizing industries, solving environmental problems, or producing the medicines of tomorrow. There is a meditative quality to mushroom hunting, walking slowly through a forest, eyes scanning the ground. Learning to see what is hidden, the flash of orange that reveals a chanterelle among dead leaves. The subtle bump that becomes a matsutake, buried in needle litter, the patience required. The attention, the way time seems to slow when you are focused on noticing. Many foragers speak of it almost spiritually. The way it connects them to place, to season, to the rhythms of nature. You can't rush a mushroom hunt. You can't force mushrooms to appear. You can only walk, look, and be present. When you find a prize, there is joy, but also gratitude. The forest has given you something. You've read its signs correctly, been attentive enough, lucky enough. Carrying mushrooms home feels different from buying them at a store. These were hidden hours ago. You found them through knowledge and effort. Preparing them becomes more meaningful. The whole process, from walking in rain-soaked woods to the smell of mushrooms cooking, creates a direct connection to the land that modern life rarely offers. For some, this connection becomes essential, a way to stay grounded, literally and metaphorically, in a world that often feels unmoored. Mushrooms can be preserved in many ways, each changing their character. Drying concentrates flavors, making porcini even more intensely nutty, shiitake richer and smokier. Dried mushrooms can last years, a pantry staple that carries summer forests into winter kitchens. Rehydrating them produces liquid that is essentially mushroom stock, too valuable to discard. Pickling mushrooms in vinegar with spices creates tangy preserves, common in Eastern European cuisines. Freezing works for some species but poorly for others, as ice crystals damage cell structure, making them mushy when thawed. Mushroom powder, made by grinding dried specimens, becomes an umami seasoning, adding depth to soups and sauces. Some cultures ferment mushrooms, creating flavors that are complex and funky. Each preservation method is a transformation, not just keeping mushrooms, but changing them into something new. Traditional cuisines develop these techniques over centuries, learning which mushrooms responded well to which treatments, building knowledge that is encoded in recipes passed through generations. A jar of pickled mushrooms represents accumulated wisdom, trial and error across lifetimes, distilled into a process that turns ephemeral fungi into lasting food. The ethics of mushroom foraging have become complicated as interest has surged. In some areas, overharvesting threatens fungal populations. Commercial foragers strip forests, taking every mushroom they find, preventing spore dispersal and potentially damaging mycelium. Popular spots become trampled, degraded by too many feet searching for the same prized species. Conservationists debate whether foraging should be restricted. Some argue that sustainable harvesting doesn't harm fungi, that taking fruiting bodies while leaving mycelium is no different from picking apples. Others worry about ecological disruption, about rare species being collected to local extinction, about the cumulative impact of thousands of foragers. The debates reveal tensions between access and conservation, tradition and regulation, commercial interests and ecological protection. Most serious foragers follow ethics they learn from mentors. Take only what you'll use. Don't harvest everything you find. Tread lightly. Learn before you take. But not everyone follows these principles. As mushrooms become trendy, appearing in upscale restaurants and wellness marketing, pressures on wild populations increase. The mushroom's sudden popularity creates dilemmas that have no easy answers, balancing human desire against fungal survival, tradition against tourism, the pleasure of foraging against the health of ecosystems. Some mushrooms form relationships with specific tree species and will fruit near no other. Matsutake mushrooms grow only with certain pines, their mycelium intimately entwined with pine roots. You'll never find a matsutake near an oak. Birch boletes associate with birch trees, chanterelles with conifers or hardwoods, depending on the species. This specificity helps foragers If you know a mushroom's tree partner, you know where to look. But it also reveals the depth of these relationships. Over millions of years of evolution, the fungus and tree have become dependent on each other, their biology intertwined, their survival linked. When forests are cleared and replanted with different species, these specialist fungi disappear. They can't simply switch to a new host. The partnership is too specific, the biochemistry too matched. Restoring forests means not just planting trees, but re-establishing these fungal networks, reintroducing the mushrooms that belong there. Without them, the trees struggle, growing more slowly, less resistant to stress. The forest isn't complete until its invisible half, the fungal community, is present again. Conserving forests means conserving fungi, protecting not just what we see above ground, but the hidden partnerships that make the forest whole. Mushrooms have different personalities, if we can use that word. Oyster mushrooms are aggressive colonizers, growing fast, fruiting abundantly, outcompeting rivals. They're the weedy species thriving on disturbance, quick to exploit fresh resources. Morels are patient, waiting years in the soil before conditions align for fruiting. They're specialists, picky about when and where they appear. Honey mushrooms are persistent, grinding away at living trees over decades, slowly killing them while feeding on their tissues. Each species has a strategy, a way of being that works in its niche. Some are sprinters, others marathoners. Some are opportunists, others highly specialized. Understanding these tendencies helps in cultivation. Oyster mushrooms are easy to grow because they're adaptable and vigorous. Morels remain nearly impossible to cultivate commercially because we don't fully understand their complex life cycle and requirements. The mushroom strategy, its ecological personality, determines how we interact with it, whether we can domesticate it, how we find it in the wild. Learning these patterns is like learning the characters in a story, each mushroom playing its role, contributing to the larger narrative of the forest's life. The future of mushrooms and humanity seems increasingly intertwined. As we face climate change, mushrooms offer tools. Carbon sequestration through forest fungi, bioremediation of polluted sites, sustainable materials that replace plastics and foams. As we explore space, fungi might travel with us, recycling our waste, growing our food, even building our habitats. As we confront disease, fungal compounds provide new medicines, new approaches to treatment. But we also face threats from fungi, diseases that devastate crops like wheat rust or Panama disease in bananas, pathogens that kill wildlife like the chytrid fungus destroying amphibian populations, infections that are becoming drug-resistant, threatening human health. Fungi are neither friend nor enemy. They're actors in the vast ecological and evolutionary play, pursuing their own survival. Sometimes our interests align, sometimes they conflict. Understanding fungi better, learning to work with them when we can, defend against them when we must, will be crucial in the coming decades. The kingdom that works invisibly beneath our feet may hold some of the most important keys to our future. If we're wise enough to recognize them, patient enough to study them, humble enough to partner with them. And here, as our journey through the fungal kingdom comes to a quiet close, let yourself relax even more deeply. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the surface beneath you. Notice your breath gentle and even, like spores drifting on a soft breeze. The world of mushrooms continues all around us, working in silence, transforming death into life, weaving connections we cannot see. But you don't need to think about it anymore. You can simply let go, knowing that beneath the surface, the work continues. Networks spreading, nutrients flowing, life renewing itself in endless patient cycles. If sleep comes now, welcome it. If you are still awake, that is perfectly fine. There is no pressure, no urgency, only the quiet knowledge that you've wandered through a hidden kingdom, and perhaps you'll remember some of what you found there, or perhaps it will fade like a dream, gentle and peaceful. The mushrooms will still be there tomorrow, and the next day, and long after we're gone, growing, fruiting, sporulating, doing what they've done for hundreds of millions of years. And in that continuity, that persistence, there is something deeply comforting. The world is older and stranger, and more resilient than we imagine, and we are part of it, breathing the same air that carries fungal spores, walking on ground held together by mycelial threads, connected to the vast quiet work of life that never stops, never hurries, simply continues. The diversity of mushroom forms seems endless. There are mushrooms that look like coral branches reaching from the seafloor, except they're growing from fallen logs. There are puffballs, perfectly spherical, like leather balls left in the woods. Jelly fungi that wobble and glisten, translucent as amber. Tooth fungi with hanging spines instead of gills, delicate as icicles. Bird's nest fungi cradling tiny egg-shaped spore packets. Earth stars that open like flowers, their outer layer peeling back to reveal the spore sac within. Each form reflects a different solution to the same problem: how to produce and disperse millions of spores efficiently. Some maximize surface area with gills or pores. Some use explosive mechanisms. Some attract animals. Some simply expose spores to wind. The variety shows evolution's creativity, the way life explores every possible variation, every niche, every strategy. Walking through a forest and finding these different forms is like visiting a sculpture garden, where every piece is alive, functional, temporary. They appear, fulfill their purpose, and disappear, leaving only spores and memories. Mushroom cultivation is both ancient art and modern science. In China, people have been growing shiitake on logs for over 1,000 years, carefully selecting tree species, inoculating them with spawn, maintaining moisture and shade. The knowledge passed through generations, becoming both livelihood and craft. Today, commercial cultivation uses sterilized substrate in climate-controlled rooms, producing mushrooms year-round at industrial scale. But the principles remain similar: provide the right food source, the right environment, and fungi will fruit. Different species require different approaches. Oyster mushrooms are forgiving, growing on straw, sawdust, even coffee grounds. Button mushrooms need composted manure, carefully prepared and pasteurized. Shiitake demands hardwood, either logs or compressed sawdust blocks. Morels remain mostly uncultivated, too finicky, their requirements too complex. Each species presents a puzzle. What temperatures trigger fruiting? How much moisture? What nutrients in what ratios? Growers become intimately familiar with their mushrooms, learning to read subtle signs, adjusting conditions, coaxing fruits from mycelium. It is agriculture, but it feels more like animal husbandry, tending living things with specific needs and behaviors. The role of mushrooms in traditional medicine extends far beyond the well-known species. In the Amazon, indigenous people use dozens of fungal species for various ailments. Some for wounds, their antimicrobial properties preventing infection. Some for fevers, their compounds modulating immune response. Some for spiritual healing, creating altered states used in diagnosis and treatment. In Africa, traditional healers employ fungi for everything from digestive issues to snake bites. In Europe, before modern medicine, folk remedies often included mushrooms, their use encoded in common names. Witch's butter for a jelly fungus, dead man's fingers for Xylaria. These names carried knowledge about properties, uses, warnings. When synthetic medicines replaced these traditions, much knowledge was lost. Elders who remembered which mushroom for which purpose passed away without teaching the next generation. Now ethnobotanists and ethnomycologists race to document what remains, interviewing traditional healers, recording recipes and methods, trying to preserve centuries of experiential knowledge before it vanishes completely. Some of this traditional knowledge is being validated by research. Other parts remain mysterious, effects reported but mechanisms unknown, waiting for science to catch up with tradition. Mushrooms change how we think about individuals and communities. A forest can contain a single fungal individual covering acres, yet also thousands of separate mycelia from different species, all interacting. Where does one individual end and another begin? When two compatible mycelia fuse, are they now one organism or two cooperating? Fungi blur these boundaries. They challenge our assumptions about what makes something an individual, about the nature of self. In this, they're teaching us about cooperation, about how complex systems emerge from simple interactions. A mycelial network is not controlled by any central authority. There is no brain, no command center. Yet it responds to changes, reallocates resources, grows toward food and away from toxins. This distributed intelligence fascinates computer scientists, studying networks, swarm behavior, emergent systems. The fungus achieves complex outcomes through simple rules applied locally by countless cells. No single cell knows the big picture, yet collectively they create an organism that can span forests. It is a different model of existence from animals, from the centralized consciousness we're used to, and it suggests that intelligence, problem-solving, adaptability can take forms very different from what we imagine. The seasonal rhythms of mushroom fruiting create natural calendars. In temperate forests, morels appear in spring, often after the first warm rain following winter. Chanterelles fruit in summer, after thunderstorms. Porcini appear in fall, triggered by cooling temperatures. Winter sees oyster mushrooms on frozen logs, one of the few mushrooms cold, doesn't stop. Foragers learn these patterns, anticipating mushroom seasons like farmers anticipate harvests. In some communities, mushroom seasons structure the year as much as holidays. Spring morel hunts are social events, families and friends spreading through forests, comparing finds, sharing secret spots, or keeping them jealously guarded. Fall mushroom festivals celebrate the abundance, with markets, cooking contests, identification workshops. These rhythms connect people to place, to the yearly cycle, to patterns older than human timekeeping. You can't rush mushroom season. You can't manufacture it. You can only wait, watch for the signs, and when conditions align, be ready. This waiting teaches patience, attention, humility. The mushrooms fruit on their schedule, not ours. We adjust to them, not the other way around. Some mushrooms have flavors so unique, they've become culinary treasures. Matsutake, prized in Japan, has a spicy, aromatic quality. Unlike any other mushroom, often described as cinnamon-like or piney. A single matsutake can sell for hundreds of dollars in Tokyo markets. Porcini has a deep, nutty richness that intensifies when dried, a flavor Italian cuisine has celebrated for centuries. Truffles, of course, command astronomical prices for their unique aroma, musky and complex, a flavor that can't be replicated or replaced. But there are humbler species with their own special qualities. Hedgehog mushrooms have a delicate, nutty flavor and a texture that stays firm when cooked. Black trumpets are subtle but hauntingly aromatic. Chicken of the woods has a lemony tang. Each species offers something different, expanding the palate beyond the mild button mushrooms most people know. Cooking mushrooms well requires understanding their individual properties. Some should be cooked hot and fast to keep them firm. Others benefit from slow, gentle cooking that draws out moisture and concentrates flavor. Some pair with butter and cream. Others shine with soy sauce and ginger. Learning these nuances turns cooking from following recipes to understanding ingredients, a deeper literacy in the language of flavor. The invisible work of decomposer fungi is essential to soil health. In agricultural fields, fungi break down crop residues, releasing nutrients for next year's plants. But modern farming often disrupts these communities. Tilling destroys mycelial networks. Fungicides kill beneficial fungi, along with harmful ones. Monocultures lack the diversity that supports diverse fungal communities. The result is degraded soil, requiring more synthetic fertilizers to maintain fertility. Some farmers are trying different approaches. No-till farming preserves fungal networks. Cover crops feed fungi and build soil life. Reduced fungicide use allows beneficial species to establish. Inoculating fields with mycorrhizal fungi helps crops access nutrients more efficiently. These regenerative practices work with fungi rather than against them, rebuilding soil health, sequestering carbon, reducing chemical inputs. It is a return in some ways to older agricultural wisdom that understood soil as alive, as something to be fed and tended, not just a medium to hold plants. The fungi are already there, waiting. They evolved to recycle plant material, to form partnerships with roots. Give them the right conditions, and they'll do what they've done for millions of years, building soil, feeding plants, maintaining the cycles that make agriculture possible. Mushroom poisoning is more complex than simply toxic or safe. Some mushrooms cause mild stomach upset, unpleasant, but not dangerous. Others attack specific organs. The death cap destroys the liver and kidneys over days, giving false hope as initial symptoms pass before organ failure begins. Gyromitra species contain compounds that become toxic when metabolized, affecting some people severely, while others seem unaffected. Some mushrooms are poisonous only in certain conditions, when eaten raw but safe when cooked, or toxic when consumed with alcohol. The variety of toxins and effects means there is no universal antidote, no single treatment. Each case requires different intervention. Some toxins can be purged through vomiting or activated charcoal if caught early. Others require intensive supportive care, managing symptoms while waiting for the body to clear the toxins. A few require specific antidotes or even organ transplants. The severity depends on the species, the amount consumed, individual sensitivity, how quickly treatment begins. This complexity makes mushroom identification critically important. One mistake can have consequences ranging from a stomach ache to death. It is why guides emphasize caution, why experienced foragers double and triple check identifications, why the rule is when in doubt, throw it out. The connection between mushrooms and insects goes deeper than spreading spores. Some beetles spend their entire lives on specific mushroom species, larvae tunneling through the flesh, adults mating on the caps. Some flies lay eggs exclusively on certain mushrooms, their larvae developing in the decaying tissue. These insects are so specialized they can be used as identification clues. If you find a particular beetle, you know you are looking at a specific mushroom species. The relationships are ancient, coevolution creating dependencies. The insect gets food and habitat. The mushroom gets spore dispersal and sometimes protection, as insect larvae consume competing molds. Some mushrooms produce compounds that attract their insect partners, chemical signals that say food here. Good place to lay eggs. The insects respond, drawn by aromas they've evolved to recognize. Breaking open a mushroom often reveals a hidden world, tiny insects tunneling through the flesh, leaving behind elaborate patterns of galleries and chambers. It is easy to see these insects as pests, ruining mushrooms we want to eat. But they're part of the ecosystem, playing roles as specific and important as the mushrooms themselves. The forest is full of these intimate connections, partnerships and dependencies invisible until you look closely. Mushrooms can indicate environmental conditions and changes. Certain species fruit only in old-growth forests, indicators of ecosystem health and age. Others appear after fires, disturbances, or on specific types of pollution. Mycologists can read a landscape through its mushrooms, inferring soil chemistry, moisture levels, tree health, history. A diversity of mushroom species suggests a healthy, mature ecosystem with complex fungal communities. An absence of expected species might indicate pollution, disease, or recent disturbance. In monitoring forests, documenting mushroom populations provides data that complements other measures. Shifts in which species appear when they fruit, how abundantly, can signal changes in climate, soil, tree health. It is a kind of diagnostic, reading the forest's condition through its fungal expression. Indigenous knowledge systems have long used similar observations, noting when mushrooms appear, which species grow where, understanding these as signs of broader patterns. Modern ecology is rediscovering this approach using fungi as indicators, sentinels that reveal what is happening beneath the surface where conventional monitoring can't easily reach. The ethics of naming and classifying mushrooms involves complex questions. Scientific names use Latin, creating a universal language that crosses cultural barriers. But these names often ignore or replace indigenous names, erasing traditional knowledge. A mushroom might have been known and used by a people for centuries, but the scientific literature credits the European who first described it to Western science. Efforts to decolonize mycology involve recognizing these traditional names, crediting indigenous knowledge, involving local communities in research. It means acknowledging that Western science is not the only valid way of knowing mushrooms, that traditional ecological knowledge built over generations has value beyond what can be measured in laboratories. It means asking permission, sharing benefits, collaborating rather than extracting. These conversations are challenging, confronting histories of colonialism and exploitation. But they're necessary for a more complete understanding of fungi and a more equitable approach to research. The mushroom doesn't care what we call it, but the names we use, who gets credit for discoveries, how knowledge is shared and protected. These things matter deeply to people and communities. Getting it right requires humility, listening, and a willingness to change long-established practices. Growing mushrooms at home has become increasingly accessible. Simple kits allow anyone to fruit oyster mushrooms on coffee grounds in their kitchen. More ambitious projects involve inoculating logs with shiitake spawn, stacking them in shady backyards, waiting months for the first flush. The satisfaction of growing your own food combines with the particular pleasure of working with fungi. Organisms that seem slightly magical in how they transform substrate into mushrooms. Watching mycelium colonize a jar of grain, turning it white and fuzzy, seeing the first tiny pins appear, knowing mushrooms are coming. Harvesting a flush of perfect oyster mushrooms that you grew from start to finish. It connects you to the process, makes you appreciate the complexity involved. You learn through doing what temperature and humidity do, how fresh air exchange affects fruiting, why contamination happens. Failures teach as much as successes. That batch that turned green with mold, the mushrooms that aborted before maturing. Each problem prompts research, adjustment, learning. Over time, you develop an intuition, a feel for the work. You become familiar with the rhythm of fungal growth, the patience required, the attention to detail. It is meditative in its way, this tending of invisible life waiting for it to reveal itself in mushroom form. The future of protein might include mushrooms in unexpected ways. Beyond simply eating mushrooms, companies are using fungal mycelium as a scaffold for growing meat alternatives. The branching structure of mycelium mimics the fibrous texture of muscle tissue. Fed with nutrients encouraged to grow in specific patterns, mycelium can create products that tear, chew, and taste remarkably like meat. Other companies ferment specific fungi to produce proteins identical to those in milk, eggs, or meat, then use these proteins to create animal-free versions of familiar foods. Fungi are efficient protein factories, growing quickly, requiring minimal space and resources compared to raising animals. As global population rises and the environmental cost of animal agriculture becomes clearer, fungal proteins offer an alternative. Not just mushrooms as vegetables, but fungi as the foundation of entirely new food systems. This requires changing perceptions, convincing people that fungal protein is not just acceptable, but desirable. It requires investment in production facilities, development of appealing products, navigation of regulatory frameworks. But the potential is enormous. Fungi could help feed the world while reducing agriculture's environmental footprint, preserving land, water, and atmosphere. The humble mushroom, reimagined and re-engineered, might be central to humanity's food future. Mushrooms appear in language and metaphor in revealing ways. We talk about ideas mushrooming, spreading rapidly like mycelium. We call sudden developments that appear without obvious preparation mushroom growth. Someone kept in the dark and fed manure is treated like a mushroom. The phrase capturing the conditions some mushrooms prefer. These metaphors reveal how we see fungi as sudden, mysterious, thriving on decay. There is often something vaguely unsettling in mushroom metaphors reflecting our ambivalence. Mushrooms are useful but also uncanny, beneficial but also potentially deadly. In horror and fantasy, mushroom imagery evokes the alien, the transformative, the boundary between life and death. Zombie fungi mushroom circles as fairy portals, mushrooms as food for the dead or doorways to other realms. Even positive uses carry a sense of the strange. Mushrooms appear overnight. They glow in the dark. They can poison or heal. They fit our narrative need for things that are liminal, that cross boundaries, that transform. Language captures this, encoding our complicated relationship with fungi in the phrases we use without thinking. Metaphors that carry centuries of observation, fear, fascination, and respect. The smell of earth after rain, that distinctive petrichor, owes some of its character to fungi. As rain hits dry soil, it disturbs spores, releases compounds fungi produce, stirs up the organic molecules associated with decay and growth. That earthy smell is partly the smell of fungi, their metabolic byproducts, their spores entering the air. It is a smell humans find pleasant, even comforting, perhaps because it signals moisture, growth, fertility, perhaps because our ancestors learned to associate it with conditions that made foraging productive. Mushrooms often fruit after rain, so the smell might unconsciously trigger anticipation, a learned response from thousands of generations of mushroom hunters. Whatever the reason, the connection is there. Rain, earth, fungi. The smell that says the dry time has ended, growth can resume. It is one more way fungi are woven into our sensory experience of the world, shaping our environment in ways we notice without recognizing. Present in the background of our awareness, constant and essential. Mushroom photography has become an art form, revealing beauty in fungi. Macrophotography shows details invisible to the naked eye, the delicate gills radiating from the cap's center, the tiny droplets beading on a polypore's surface, the intricate texture of a shaggy cap. Long exposures in dark forests make bioluminescent mushrooms glow like emeralds. Light painting techniques create surreal images, mushrooms illuminated against dark woods like alien artifacts. These images change how people see fungi, no longer just brown lumps in leaf litter, but subjects of beauty, worthy of attention and appreciation. Photographers spend hours in uncomfortable positions, waiting for light, adjusting angles, capturing moments of fungal perfection. Their work appears in galleries, books, social media, spreading awareness and fascination. Some photographers focus on the strange and bizarre. Others seek elegance and simplicity. Some document species scientifically. Others create impressionistic interpretations. All share a passion for fungi, a desire to reveal what others miss, to celebrate these organisms through imagery. Their art serves science by documenting species, serves conservation by inspiring care, serves culture by expanding our aesthetic appreciation beyond flowers and sunsets to include the often overlooked kingdom growing at our feet. The relationship between climate change and fungi is complex and concerning. As temperatures shift, fungal ranges are moving. Species that fruited in certain regions are appearing further north or at higher elevations, tracking their preferred climate zones. Fruiting times are changing, springs arriving earlier, autumns extending longer. These shifts disrupt relationships with plant partners, with insects that depend on fungi, with animals that eat mushrooms. Some fungi may adapt quickly, others may not, especially specialists with narrow requirements. Meanwhile, fungi themselves affect climate. Forest fungi store carbon underground, but warming soils may speed decomposition, releasing stored carbon back into the atmosphere. It is a potential feedback loop, warming causing release, which causes more warming. Understanding these dynamics is crucial. Fungi play roles in carbon cycling, in forest health, in ecosystem function. Changes to fungal communities ripple outward, affecting everything connected to them. Scientists are racing to document these changes, to understand mechanisms, to predict outcomes. The mushrooms fruiting differently than they did decades ago are early warning signs, indicators of transformations underway, consequences we're only beginning to grasp. Traditional mushroom folklore is rich and varied across cultures. In Slavic traditions, mushrooms were associated with thunder and lightning, believed to appear where lightning struck. Mushroom hunting was a cherished activity, whole families venturing into forests, knowledge of spots and species closely guarded. In Celtic folklore, fairy rings were dangerous, places where mortals could be enchanted and trapped. Stepping inside a ring meant risking abduction to the fairy realm. In Japanese culture, mushrooms represented autumn, impermanence, the beauty of fleeting things. They appeared in poetry, art, seasonal celebrations. In many indigenous American traditions, mushrooms were teachers, spirits, beings that could impart wisdom or cause madness depending on how they were approached. These folkloric traditions encoded practical knowledge, which mushrooms were safe, which deadly, when and where to find them, how to prepare them. But they also reveal deeper meanings people found in fungi: mystery, transformation, the boundary between visible and invisible worlds, life and death, danger and nourishment. Folklore kept this knowledge alive across generations, weaving practical information into memorable stories, creating cultural relationships with fungi that went beyond mere food. The simple act of cleaning mushrooms reveals their nature, brushing off dirt and debris. You feel the texture, fragile gills that tear easily, firm flesh that resists, spongy pores that compress under your thumb. The surface might be sticky, velvety, scaly smooth. There is an intimacy to it, handling these organisms, preparing them for cooking. You notice details, the way the cap curves, the color gradations, the spots where insects have fed. Each mushroom is an individual, shaped by where it grew, how much moisture it received, whether it fruited in sun or shade. Wild mushrooms especially show this variation, no two exactly alike. Unlike produce bred for uniformity, these are wild things, each carrying the story of its particular growth. Cleaning them becomes a moment of connection, a pause before cooking to appreciate what you found or bought. It is easy to rush this step, to treat mushrooms as ingredients rather than organisms. But taking time, noticing, acknowledging that these were recently alive, growing in soil or wood, completes a circle. From forest to table, wild to cultivated, living to nourishment, mushrooms have inspired scientific breakthroughs beyond medicine. The way mycelium optimizes nutrient transport inspired algorithms for designing efficient networks. Computer scientists studied how fungi allocate resources and used the principles to solve complex routing problems. The Tokyo rail system was modeled using slime molds, a fungal relative, which found solutions matching human-designed networks, but with different, sometimes better efficiency. Materials science looks to fungal structures for inspiration. The strength of mycelium, the way it creates composite materials by binding particles together, informs development of new building materials. Fungal enzymes inspire industrial processes for breaking down tough materials. The chemicals fungi produce to defend themselves or communicate become templates for new pharmaceuticals. Pesticides, industrial compounds. Nature has been experimenting with fungal biology for hundreds of millions of years, solving problems of structure, chemistry, resource allocation, communication. Human technology, only centuries old, has much to learn from this deep well of tested solutions. Studying mushrooms isn't just about understanding fungi. It is about learning principles that apply to networks, materials, chemistry, systems, principles we can adapt and apply to human challenges. The texture of mushrooms is as important as their flavor. A properly cooked mushroom should have some resistance, some bite. Overcooked, they become slimy or rubbery. Undercooked, they're bland and squeaky. Getting it right requires understanding the mushroom's water content and structure. Mushrooms are mostly water, held in cellular structures. Cooking breaks down these structures, releases moisture, concentrates flavor. High heat drives off water quickly, allowing browning reactions that create rich, savory flavors. Low heat or overcrowding leads to steaming, mushrooms releasing water and simmering in their own juice, becoming waterlogged and limp. Different species require different approaches. Delicate mushrooms, like enoki or oyster, need gentle, brief cooking. Dense mushrooms like portobello can handle high heat and longer times. Some mushrooms benefit from dry cooking, roasting or grilling to develop char and crispy edges. Others are better in braises or stews, where they absorb surrounding flavors. Learning these subtleties elevates mushroom cooking from boiled or sautéed without thought to intentional, tailored to the specific mushroom and desired outcome. Texture and flavor, both matter, both require attention and understanding. In some forests, mushroom diversity is staggering. A single acre might host hundreds of fungal species, some fruiting visibly as mushrooms, others existing only as mycelium, never producing structures we'd recognize, some forming lichens, others living inside plant tissues as endophytes. This diversity reflects ecological complexity. Different fungi decompose different materials at different rates. Some specialize in fresh wood, others prefer old, well-rotted substrates. Some fruit in spring, others in fall, dividing the year. Some partner with one tree species exclusively, others are generalists. This diversity provides resilience. If one species fails, others fill its role. It creates redundancy, multiple species performing similar functions, ensuring that critical processes like decomposition continue even when conditions change. It also creates niches, opportunities for specialists that excel in narrow circumstances. High diversity means complex interactions, networks of competition and cooperation, relationships we're only beginning to map. Protecting this diversity means protecting not just rare mushrooms, but the ecosystems that support them. The forests with their fallen logs and varied trees, the soil communities, the insects and animals, the entire web of life in which fungi are embedded. Mushroom cultivation has environmental benefits beyond food production. Growing mushrooms on agricultural waste, coffee grounds, sawdust, straw, turns materials that might be discarded or burned into food. It is upcycling, adding value while reducing waste. The spent substrate, after mushrooms have extracted what they need, makes excellent compost or animal feed, still rich in nutrients. Mushroom farming requires relatively little space compared to plant or animal agriculture. Vertical growing systems can produce substantial yields in small areas, relevant for urban food production. Water use is lower than many crops. Energy requirements can be minimal, especially for species like oyster mushrooms that fruit at room temperature. The speed of growth means quick turnaround, multiple harvests per year from the same space. These advantages make mushroom cultivation attractive for small-scale farmers, urban growers, communities wanting to produce food locally. It is not a solution to all food security issues, but a valuable component of diverse, resilient food systems. And it introduces people to fungi, to the biology and ecology, fostering appreciation and understanding that might extend to wild mushrooms, forests, conservation. The moment a mushroom releases its spores is a culmination and a beginning. The mycelium has gathered resources, built the fruiting structure, matured the spores. Now they're released, millions or billions depending on the species, each a potential new organism. Most will land in unsuitable places, too dry, too wet, no food available. Outcompeted by other organisms, they'll never germinate. Of the tiny fraction that do sprout, most won't survive long. Their fragile threads will encounter hostile conditions, run out of nutrients, succumb to predators or competitors. Perhaps one in millions will find the right spot, the right partner if it needs one, and establish a successful colony. Those odds seem impossibly long, yet they work. Fungi have persisted for hundreds of millions of years using this strategy. Produce spores in overwhelming numbers, scatter them widely, Let probability and time do the work. It is inefficient from an individual spore's perspective, but effective for the species. And it is beautiful in its way, this profligacy, this generous scattering of potential into the world, trusting that somewhere, somehow, a few will take root and continue the line. Mushroom cultivation started as accident became tradition, became science. Somewhere long ago, someone noticed mushrooms growing on discarded wood or plant material. Perhaps they encouraged it, created conditions that favored fruiting. Over generations, knowledge accumulated. Which woods, which mushrooms, what conditions. Eventually, deliberate cultivation, inoculating logs, managing farms. Each culture that developed mushroom cultivation did so independently, creating unique methods suited to local species and conditions. In China, shiitake on hardwood logs. In Europe, button mushrooms on composted manure. In Japan, refined techniques for matsutake, though never fully successful. Today, cultivation is industrialized for many species, but artisanal growers still use traditional methods, preferring the slower, more labor-intensive approaches that they believe produce better flavor, more nutritious mushrooms. There is tension between efficiency and quality, scale and craft. Industrial cultivation feeds millions, making mushrooms affordable and available year-round. Traditional cultivation preserves techniques, supports small farmers, produces premium products. Both have roles. The science of cultivation continues advancing, discovering new cultivatable species, refining techniques, improving yields. What began as happy accident has become sophisticated biotechnology, yet still carries echoes of those first accidental cultivators who saw possibility in mushrooms growing on waste. Let yourself sink deeper now into relaxation, feeling the gentle pull of rest. Imagine lying on soft moss in an ancient forest, mushrooms sprouting quietly all around you. The air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of earth and growing things. Above, branches filter sunlight into a gentle green glow. There is no urgency here, no need to move or think, just the quiet presence of life, growing in its own time, following rhythms older than memory. Beneath you, beneath the moss and soil, mycelial networks spread in every direction, connecting tree to tree, recycling nutrients, sustaining the forest. You are part of this system, breathing air the trees provided, resting on ground the fungi maintain. It is all connected, all one system, and you can simply be here, held and supported, with nothing required of you except to rest. The mushrooms continue their work, patient and persistent, asking nothing, simply growing, fruiting, spreading spores, continuing cycles that have run for millennia. Let that patience enter you. Let that quiet persistence soothe your mind. There is no rush, no pressure, only the gentle, inevitable processes of life, unfolding as they always have, as they always will, regardless of worry or hurry. You can release control and simply be carried by these larger rhythms, held safe in the forest's ancient patterns. The mushroom's life cycle is a story of transformation. It begins with a spore, microscopically small, drifting on wind or water, or carried by an animal. The spore lands, and if conditions are right, it germinates, sending out a tiny thread of hyphae. This thread branches, grows, seeking food. If it encounters another compatible mycelium, they might fuse, combining genetics, becoming stronger. The mycelium spreads, sometimes for years, decomposing, storing energy. Then, when conditions trigger fruiting, perhaps rain after drought, temperature changes, seasonal shifts, the mycelium gathers resources and builds a mushroom. The mushroom emerges, grows rapidly, matures, and produces new spores, completing the cycle. Then it decays, its structure breaking down, returning nutrients to the soil. From spore to mycelium to mushroom to decay to spores again. The cycle repeats generation after generation, each one a new iteration of an ancient pattern. There is something deeply comforting about this cyclical nature. this endless return. Nothing is truly lost. Everything transforms, becomes something new, continues. The mushroom that decays feeds the mycelium that produces the next mushroom. Death and life are not opposites, but phases, transitions, part of one continuous flow. Mushrooms teach us about beauty in impermanence. They appear suddenly, peak, and decline, sometimes all within a week. There is no preserving a mushroom's beauty in the way you might preserve a flower. It will decay, liquefy, disappear. This ephemeral quality makes each mushroom sighting special, a moment that won't last, can't be hoarded or saved, only experienced and remembered. Japanese aesthetics have a concept, mono no aware, a gentle sadness at the impermanence of things, coupled with deeper appreciation because of that impermanence. Mushrooms embody this perfectly. Their beauty is real but fleeting, valuable precisely because it doesn't last. This teaches a way of seeing, of appreciating the present moment, knowing it will pass. The perfect mushroom you find today will be gone tomorrow, but that doesn't diminish it. If anything, it enhances the experience, makes you more present, more attentive, more grateful for what is before you now, in a culture often focused on permanence, preservation, possessing. Mushrooms offer a different wisdom. Enjoy what appears. Let it go when it passes. Find beauty in the cycle itself, not just in the moment of peak perfection. The underground economy of the forest runs on fungal currency. Trees trade sugars for nutrients, using fungi as intermediaries. But the exchange rates vary. A fungus connected to multiple trees might favor one over another, sending more nutrients where it receives more carbon. Trees in sunlight producing excess sugar can afford to pay well. Shaded seedlings, struggling for light, may not produce enough to secure adequate fungal services. The system creates winners and losers, but also mutual support. Mother trees often subsidize their offspring through the network, essentially paying fungi to deliver resources to their young. Dying trees may export their remaining carbon, passing on resources before they're lost. It is economy as ecosystem, with fungi as both participants and infrastructure. They're not neutral conduits but active players, responding to incentives, making choices in the sense that organisms make choices, following patterns that maximize their own survival and reproduction. Understanding this economy changes how we see forests. Not just collections of trees, but complex markets where resources flow according to supply and demand, relationships and kinship, all mediated by the fungal internet beneath our feet. Some mushrooms are so perfectly adapted to their environment that they seem designed. The desert truffle fruits underground in one of Earth's harshest climates, surviving where few fungi can. Arctic mushrooms fruit through snow, adapted to extreme cold and brief growing seasons. Cave mushrooms live in perpetual darkness, feeding on bat guano and whatever organic matter filters down. Deep-sea fungi exist in pressure, cold, and darkness that would kill most surface organisms. Each environment has its fungal specialists, species that have evolved solutions to problems that would seem insurmountable. These adaptations remind us that life finds a way, that no environment is too extreme for evolution to explore, given enough time. They also reveal fungal biology's plasticity, the same basic cellular machinery, modified in countless ways to fit countless niches. The mushroom you see in a meadow and the one fruiting in a cave share common ancestry, common structures, but have diverged to inhabit radically different worlds. This diversity of form and function, all within the fungal kingdom, speaks to the power of evolution, the creativity of natural selection, the resilience and adaptability of life itself. The future may see fungi helping clean up our mistakes. Oil spills, plastic pollution, toxic waste. Fungi can break down many of these compounds. Researchers are identifying and engineering fungal species to tackle specific pollutants, creating living cleanup crews that could remediate contaminated sites. It is slower than mechanical cleanup, but potentially more thorough, reaching into soil pores and cracks machines can't access, truly degrading pollutants rather than just moving them. There are challenges. scaling up from laboratory to field conditions, ensuring introduced fungi don't become invasive, dealing with toxic byproducts of decomposition. But the potential is enormous. Imagine abandoned industrial sites, poisoned and barren, becoming green again through fungal bioremediation. Imagine plastics currently littering oceans and landscapes, being digested by engineered fungi, broken down into harmless components. It is not a magic solution. We still need to reduce pollution, change behaviors, prevent contamination. But for the damage already done, fungi offer hope, a way to harness nature's own recycling systems to undo some of what we've broken. The same organisms that have been cleaning up the planet for hundreds of millions of years, now possibly enlisted to clean up after our brief, messy tenure as industrial civilization. Mushroom appreciation crosses boundaries of language and culture. Show someone a beautiful mushroom, and regardless of their background, they'll likely respond with interest, curiosity, perhaps delight. The forms are universal in their strangeness, accessible in their familiarity. Everyone has seen a mushroom. Not everyone has stopped to really look, to notice, to wonder. Introducing people to fungi, to the details and diversity, often sparks fascination. Children especially respond to mushrooms, drawn to the colors, the weird shapes, the slightly transgressive appeal of things that grow on rot. Mushroom forays, where experts lead groups through forests, identifying species, create community across age, background, experience level. Everyone is looking at the same mushrooms, learning together, sharing finds. There is something inherently egalitarian about it. The mushrooms don't care who finds them. Knowledge is shared freely. Expertise is respected but doesn't create rigid hierarchies. It is collaboration and exploration. People connecting over shared curiosity about these organisms that belong to no one and everyone, that grow wild and free, offering themselves to whoever takes time to look. As you continue to relax, breathing slowly and deeply, let the image of mushrooms fill your mind gently. Not thinking hard about them, just allowing them to be present. Their soft shapes, their quiet growth, their patient work. Feel yourself becoming like mycelium, spreading gently, relaxing into the substrate of rest, branching into sleep. There is no effort required, no struggle. Just a natural process, like a mushroom fruiting, like spores settling, like hyphae growing. Your body knows how to rest, how to sleep, how to let go. Trust that knowledge. Trust the process. The mushrooms don't force growth. They simply allow it, responding to conditions. Following their nature, you can do the same, allowing rest to come, not chasing it, not forcing it, simply being open to it. The forest is dark and quiet. The mycelium spreads unseen. The mushrooms rise when the time is right. And you too can sink into the rhythms of nature, into the quiet space where thinking stops and rest begins. Let go a little more with each breath. Let the soft darkness hold you. Let sleep approach in its own time, gentle as mushrooms growing, inevitable as dawn following night. The study of fungi, mycology, is a field where amateurs can still contribute. Unlike many sciences requiring expensive equipment and years of training, mushroom identification and documentation can be done by anyone willing to learn. Citizen science projects collect mushroom sightings, building databases of when and where species fruit, tracking changes over time, documenting rare species. Amateur mycologists discover new species, sometimes in their own backyards. Foragers compile local knowledge, creating guides and sharing information. This accessibility makes mycology democratic, open, collaborative. It also means the field advances through contributions from diverse sources, not just academic institutions. Traditional knowledge holders, foragers, amateur naturalists, photographers, all add to our understanding. There is still so much we don't know about fungi that careful observation, even without sophisticated analysis, provides valuable data. This openness to amateur participation enriches the science, bringing in perspectives and knowledge that might otherwise be missed. Creating a community of inquiry that spans professional and amateur, academic and traditional, global and local. Mushrooms have featured in art throughout history, from ancient cave paintings to contemporary installations. They appear in medieval manuscripts, illuminated margins, decorated with whimsical fungi, in Renaissance still lifes, carefully rendered among fruits and flowers. In Dutch Golden Age paintings, symbolizing decay and mortality in vanitas compositions. Japanese woodblock prints celebrate matsutake and other prized species. Art Nouveau artists used mushroom forms in architecture, jewelry, illustration, drawn to their organic curves. Modern and contemporary artists use mushrooms to explore themes of nature, transformation, psychedelic experience, environmental change. Sculptors create mushroom forms in clay, metal, glass. Installation artists grow living fungi as part of artworks, the mushrooms themselves becoming artistic medium. This artistic attention reflects and reinforces cultural fascination with fungi, making them objects of aesthetic appreciation, not just scientific study or culinary interest. Each artwork captures a moment of human-mushroom interaction, preserving how a particular person in a particular time saw these organisms, what meanings they found in them, what beauty or significance they expressed through fungal imagery. The taste of wild mushrooms carries terroir, the flavor of place. A porcini from one forest tastes subtly different from one from another region, reflecting soil chemistry, associated trees, local climate. These differences are real, measurable in chemical composition, experienced in flavor. It is why foragers develop loyalty to particular patches, why chefs prize mushrooms from specific locations. The mushroom absorbs its environment, concentrating minerals from the soil, compounds from its tree partners, creating a flavor profile unique to its origin. This connects eating wild mushrooms to place in ways cultivated mushrooms, grown on standardized substrate, cannot match. When you eat a wild mushroom, you are tasting the forest it came from, the specific trees it grew with, the minerals in that particular soil. It is intimate and specific, a flavor that can't be replicated elsewhere. This concept of terroir, more commonly applied to wine, applies equally to wild mushrooms, making them not just food but embodied geography, the taste of a place concentrated in fungal flesh. Traditional mushroom preservation techniques vary culturally, but share common goals, keeping mushrooms safe to eat and delicious long after their brief fruiting. Drying is universal, used across cultures, each developing preferred methods. Some sun-dry, some use gentle warmth. The method affects flavor. Smoked mushrooms carry complexity from the smoke. Sunday-dried might retain brightness. Oven-dried are more neutral. Pickling preserves through acid, creating tangy products that contrast with mushrooms' earth. In Eastern Europe, pickled mushrooms are winter staples, jars lined up in pantries, each containing a different species. Fermentation, less common but traditional in some cultures, creates deeply flavorful preserves with added benefits from probiotics. Salt preservation, where mushrooms are layered with salt and pressed, creates intensely flavored products used sparingly as seasoning. Each method is adaptation, a way to extend summer's abundance into winter's scarcity, but also transformation, creating new flavors, new products. Mushrooms reimagined through preservation. Mushrooms can indicate where to find other mushrooms. Certain species associate, fruiting together or in sequence. Finding one species in spring might suggest others will appear in the same spot come fall. Learning these associations is part of foraging knowledge. Patterns noted over years, relationships observed. Some associations are ecological, mushrooms that fruit at different seasons on the same log, each breaking down different components. Some are coincidental, species that simply prefer similar conditions. Some reflect succession, early colonizers giving way to later species as substrate breaks down. Whatever the mechanism, recognizing these patterns makes foraging more productive and predictive. You are not just looking randomly, but reading the landscape, understanding the fungal community's structure, anticipating what might appear based on what you've found. This knowledge accumulates slowly, observation building on observation, seasons adding to years, until a forager develops a sense for an area, a feel for its mushroom community's rhythms and patterns, an intuition based on experience that looks like magic but is actually deep learning. The kind that comes from paying attention over time. The sound of walking through a forest changes when you are looking for mushrooms. Your footsteps slow, become more deliberate. You rustle less, trying to move quietly, disturb less. Not for stealth in the hunting sense, but for attention, for focus. Moving slowly, you hear more. The forest's ambient sounds emerge. Birds calling, leaves rustling, distant water, your own breathing. There is a meditative quality to this altered pace, this focused attention. You are present in a way daily life rarely demands, aware of surroundings, noticing details. Mushroom hunting requires this presence. Moving fast, you'll miss them. They blend in, camouflaged by evolution to avoid being eaten. Spotting them requires slowing down, looking carefully, checking under leaves, around logs, in the spots where conditions favor fruiting. This enforced slowness becomes its own reward, a reason to hunt mushrooms even when you don't find many. The walk itself, the attention, the presence, these have value beyond the mushrooms collected. In our fast-paced lives, activities that require slowing down are increasingly precious, providing counterbalance, reminding us that not everything benefits from speed, that some things reveal themselves only to patience. Feel your breathing now, slow and steady, like the patient growth of mycelium. Each inhale brings calm, each exhale releases tension. You don't need to control your breath, just notice it. Feel it flowing in and out like nutrients cycling through a fungal network. Your body is doing the work without conscious effort, maintaining itself, sustaining you, asking nothing. Like fungi sustaining a forest, your body sustains you quietly, constantly, reliably. Trust this process. Trust your body's wisdom. It knows how to rest, how to heal, how to sleep. You don't need to manage it, control it. Just allow it, like allowing mushrooms to grow, providing conditions, and then stepping back, letting nature do what nature does. The boundaries between you and the world soften. You are not separate from the forest, the soil, the mushrooms. You are part of the same system, the same cycles, breathing the same air, made of the same elements, subject to the same natural laws. In this unity, there is peace. You don't carry the world alone. You are held by it, supported, sustained. Rest in that support. Sink into that holding. Let it carry you gently into sleep, into dreams, into the quiet darkness where consciousness dissolves and only peace remains. The question of mushroom consciousness is strange and fascinating. Do fungi experience anything like awareness? They respond to stimuli, make decisions of a sort, communicate, remember. But without neurons, without anything like a brain, how could they be conscious? Yet plants, also lacking brains, show behaviors that seem almost intelligent. Maybe consciousness as we understand it is too narrow, too based on animal neurology. Maybe there are other forms of awareness, other ways of processing information and responding to the world. Fungi coordinate complex behaviors across vast networks. They solve problems, like finding optimal routes through a maze to food sources. They adapt, learn from experience, modify responses based on past events. If these aren't signs of some form of intelligence or awareness, what are they? The debate continues among scientists and philosophers. No clear answers, only intriguing possibilities. Perhaps it doesn't matter whether we call it consciousness. The behaviors are real, the complexity is real. Fungi navigate their world with sophistication we're only beginning to appreciate. Whether that constitutes consciousness or not, it demands respect, attention. Wonder at how life manifests intelligence, in forms so different from our own. End your journey through the mushroom kingdom here, letting all you've learned settle gently into memory, or letting it fade like morning dew. Either way is perfect. The mushrooms will continue their work whether you remember these facts or not, growing in forests, decomposing in darkness, fruiting in silence, spreading spores on wind. You'll never feel. They don't need your attention to exist, but perhaps you are richer for having given it, for having spent this time wandering through their world, learning their secrets, appreciating their beauty. As you drift towards sleep or rest in quiet wakefulness, carry with you a sense of the hidden kingdoms all around. The invisible networks sustaining life, the quiet partnerships making forests possible. Know that you are connected to all of it, breathing air processed by trees supported by fungi, eating food grown in soil built by decomposition, living in a world constantly renewed by death transformed into life. It is a gentle thought, a comforting knowledge. Nothing is truly lost. Everything transforms. The cycles continue, patient and eternal. Rest now in that continuity, that endless return. Let sleep come like mushrooms after rain, sudden and natural, emerging from conditions long prepared. Good night, peaceful wanderer. May your dreams be gentle and your rest complete.